I would say. Do I have a hope of listing all your names and knowing that you'll be here or not? Do I have a hope? No, I don't. It's a prayer.
She is. Nice vest.
Thank you.
Sorry to the state, to the head of the state, town. She's at the Morristown Armory this weekend. Today until like 5 or 6. I was there on Friday when you back. Hers and I got this.
That's very great.
And it cannot get out of your way. I mean, that's the point of law.
Paul is,
I told you, it's going to get to in April. I said,
Oh, I didn't think that. I'm sorry. I
that's it. No. It's in here. I know you're trying
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth. Thank you for that beautiful opening music. Good morning and welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Marjorie Wormser. I'll be your Sunday associate this morning. And welcome all of you in this room and online to our fellowship where we covenant to weave together the fabric of community from the strands of our separate lives. We are an inclusive, welcoming, radically inclusive, justice-seeking fellowship, and whoever you are, wherever you are in life's journey, you are welcome here. We adhere to the principles of Unitarian Universalism, which you can find, among other places, on the newcomer card that's in the slot of the chair in front of you. These are fresh, new, revived cards, so please feel free to take one with you. And if you are a newcomer or visitor, please do stop by the welcome table, which was out in the Great Hall as you entered this room, entered the building and entered this room. And this is a great time to silence any noise-making devices. And why don't we take a moment, if you feel comfortable, to greet someone you did not come with this morning. It could be an elbow bump, it could be a quick hello, it could be greeting from a distance. Where's mine? Thank you, everyone, for welcoming one another so warmly. This is one of my favorite parts of the morning. So I have a few brief announcements to share. And generally, our announcements talk about anything happening today and in the next few days, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the wonderful talent show that took place yesterday. It was completely organized by our youth. And a lot of fun. So thank you for doing that. So today at 10:45 a.m. in room 204, which is upstairs and in that side of the building, directly over the terrace room, there will be a listening session on the issue of gender-neutral restrooms in our new building. This is intended to hear your views so that the best design decisions can be made. Was there also going to be one after the second service? No, just between. Thank you. And today's Odyssey project will feature Beth Wilson at 12:45 p.m. Please join us here in the meeting room for that event. On April 16th at 12:45 p.m. in room 204, there will be a listening session regarding the use of the kitchen pass-through window in the new two-family hall, the new building that we're planning to build. And this is intended to hear your views so the best design decisions can be made. So today at 10:45 regarding restrooms design, and 2 weeks from today at 12:45 regarding an element of the kitchen design. Finally, we're going to have an early start to our summer schedule. During the summer, rather than having 2 morning services, we have 1. And so starting on May 7th, our Sunday worship services will go into summertime mode with a single service at 10 a.m. on Sundays through Labor Day. May 7th will also be very exciting. The worship service celebrates the 100th anniversary of the Flower Communion and will be led by Reverend Joel and the 2nd grade religious education class. After the 10 a.m. service, we'll have a brunch, and the morning will conclude with a congregational meeting to vote on the Ministerial Search Committee. That's the group who will find Reverend Joel's successor and stay more or less, stay without a predetermined time limit. So mark your calendars for this important Sunday and join us online or in person. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. So pleased to welcome you all here in person, or perhaps in the library with family, or perhaps online. We're so glad you're all here. I'm delighted today because I think right now I'm on the lavalier mic. And thanks to the generosity of Albert Chu's family, we have this wonderful system back there that our AV technician, Alex West, is running, and I'm now going to be using my new head mic. Check this out. Isn't that a great sound? Wow. If you could probably put reverb on it, then I could sound like God or something.
Are you the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
Yes, Christmas is to come. So I'm grateful to the lavalier mic, but I'm really happy to have this. Now I can turn my head and you can still hear me during the time. So I'm so grateful to choose. This is great. Thank you. Some years ago, I was reading this. There's some wonderful writings by Rachel Naomi Raymond. She is a writer as well as a physician. And she writes a lot about her spiritual journey. And one of the things, she described one day this dream that she'd had. And it's one of those dreams where you just have that, I don't know if you've ever had one of these, but it's one of those dreams where you sit up and you go, oh, what was that? She had one of those. And when she woke up, she was like, what was that? And she had dreamt that she was a daffodil bulb in the earth, not yet blossomed. She thought, well, that's kind of weird. You know, I was expecting something like skeletons or fires or something. So she talked to a friend who works with dreams and asked her friend, what do you think that dream means? I mean, it's just, all it was a daffodil bulb. And she said, well, why don't you have a conversation with the daffodil bulb? And she did. And the daffodil bulb said, I want to bloom, but I can't, I mustn't, I can't. And above the daffodil bulb was a rock. And the rock said, don't bloom, it's dangerous out there, I will protect you. Rachel Naomi Raymond told her friend this, and her friend nodded, and Rachel Naomi Raymond realized, you know what? That rock sounds just like my father. My father, she explained, had lived, his life had been very hard. And he had managed his way through to escape many dangers and difficulties. But Rachel Naomi Raymond knew she had to blossom. The daffodil had to come forth, spring had to come, and the flower had to grow. It was really the only way she could fully live and fully be herself. I've always loved that particular story, sort of the understanding that the importance of our coming to life and blossoming. And I'm thinking a lot about that today on a day that many religious groups around us are celebrating Passover in some way. Excuse me, not Passover, Palm Sunday in one way or another. We'll be celebrating Passover too, but that'll be next Thursday. So good morning and welcome. Let's light our chalice and share in our affirmation this morning. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and this is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. I invite you to join me in singing. The words will be here on the screen or on your screens if you're in the library or online. You can also sing if you're here from the book, number 112. When I Am Frightened, I invite you to stand in body or spirit as you would like.
Quietly, will you
I'd like to share a story this morning, and if children, youth, anybody who's young at heart would like to come up to the front and join me for that, I would be really grateful. Hi there, come on up. Oh, glad to see you. Good morning. So in some traditions, especially in Christian traditions, today is known as Palm Sunday. Palms are kind of a tree that grow in warm places. So if you ever go to California, especially Southern California, you'll see palm trees. The trees have fronds, really, not so much as they have branches. It's called Palm Sunday because that's the day when the Rabbi Jesus rode into Jerusalem, and the roadway as he rode in, they covered it with palm fronds. Jesus was a rabbi who told many stories, and one of the stories that he told was the story of the Good Samaritan. Is that coming in and out? I'm blocking the... We're still learning here. So in the story of the Good Samaritan, the way Jesus Jesus has been talking with some folks and talking about being a good neighbor. And a person asks, well, who is my neighbor? I mean, there's Irene. I don't like Irene. Does she have to be my neighbor? I'm picking on Irene. Sorry, Irene.
I won't sit here.
And so Jesus tells this story. He says, so there was this minister who was going on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. Jerusalem's a city, Jericho's a city, and the road between them is a pretty dangerous place. The minister sees somebody who is injured on the side of the road and doesn't do anything. Now, I'd be kind of embarrassed if I didn't stop and do anything, but it's a dangerous road. Maybe the person really wasn't injured. Maybe it was a robber pretending to be injured so the other robbers could come out and take his money, or maybe something worse. The minister goes by. Then another person goes by, a very, very wealthy person with good standing in the community, and hurries by and pretends not to see the injured person by the side of the road. And then as Jesus tells the story, a third person is going on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, this dangerous road. This third person is a Samaritan. Now, in the time of Jesus, a Samaritan, people didn't like Samaritans. They thought they were just bad people. Bad, were they bad? They weren't really bad people. There's still Samaritans in Israel, by the way. People still speak Samaritan, and in those days, the Jewish people are listening to Jesus, are hearing this story, and they're saying, Samaritans, boo, you know. The Samaritan, says Jesus, stops and helps the person by the side of the road, sees that they're injured, puts some bandages on their wounds, goes and gets some people back in Jerusalem to help carry the person to the nearest inn, and pays for the innkeeper to take care of this injured person, the Samaritan found on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. And then Jesus looks at everybody who's been listening to him, especially the person who asked him the question, and says, so who is your neighbor? And the person who asked the question thought for a moment, and he said, probably the Samaritan, isn't it? And Jesus said, yes. Now go and live like the Samaritan, which is a pretty intense thing to say in those days. Who do you suppose the Samaritan might be today? Who might we call a Samaritan? Somebody who... A homeless person. Somebody, maybe for us Unitarian Universalists, they might wear a hat that says MAGA on it. Who is our neighbor? We are so glad that you're here. You're going to go to your classes now, and would you like to carry the chalice this morning? We're going to sing Go Now in Peace as you go to your classes. Peace. Yes. Yay. Milestones and passages, this ritual of sharing our lives, reminding us to share our lives, reminding us that we need one another. And it is in the sharing we remember that need and learn to live from it. Again, a milestone or passage for our children was that they have a congregation in which they can come to us and say, we're putting on a show, we would like to use the meeting hall on April 1st. They just knew they could ask, and the answer would be, yes, let's see how we make that happen. It was a great time yesterday. So congratulations to the planners and the participants of the talent show yesterday. A passage shared by Marjorie Wormser. Please hold my sister-in-law Pam in your healing thoughts for a speedy recovery from surgery this coming Wednesday. She's starting the first of 2 procedures for a brain surgery to help with her advancing Parkinson's disease. And yet another passage, yet another shooting in a school this week. And I will say for myself, from my own experiences, when I was the minister of the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church in Littleton, Colorado, every time one happens, it takes me back there. How I wish for a day that, as a nation, we learn we don't need to live by those weapons. I invite you into the spirit of meditation and prayer. Soul of hope and compassion, how shall we empty ourselves of fear? I know I can hang on to my life for fear of what will happen tomorrow. I can avoid trouble. I can hide in my home. I can get lost in a television, binging television. Not venture forth, not blossom. For fear of the unknown or fear of the unknown. But what will come of my life if I hoard it as if it were like piles of gold? What will become of my life? What will become of our lives if we build walls around our souls, around our lives? What if we were to build walls around this place to turn people away? Afraid of them, of what they might bring. On this day, when we imagine one who rode into danger, on this day when we see just the first beginnings of spring, turn our hearts and our spirits to joy. Let the music of our souls sing the world alive. Let us be those neighbors who live by kindness, not by avoidance, by fear of the worst. Let's not imagine the one true colors we should live by, but a rainbow of colors, blossoming of wildflowers, bright against a cloudy sky. Imagine if we planned instead of death, we were to plan to be alive and among friends, friends we hadn't even met yet. Spirit of life and love, when love comes to Morristown today, they'll be sitting on a humble bus, a Greyhound, a sort of modern beast of burden maybe. And may the singing of our hearts welcome them. May the spirit of love, as they arrive, know they're welcome. And may we all find a world in which we all know each other as beloved neighbors. Amen. So be it. Blessed be. I invite you to sing with me. Number 1058. The words here are on the screen. I invite you to stand in body or spirit. And as you're standing, I just want to mention Theodore Parker was a Unitarian minister in the middle of the 1800s. And he was a brave soul who refused to live by the fears of the time, who dedicated his life as a good neighbor to all, and did so especially in his fight to abolish slavery. And the largest congregation in the United States in the middle of the 1800s was led by Theodore Parker in Boston with well over 2,000 members. These are his words and part of his influence on us.
This morning's reading is from Mary Oliver's poem entitled When Death Comes. I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it is over, I don't want to wonder if I have made my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. And now is the time for our offertory. I believe the choir will sing this morning, yes. Our offering will be shared 50% with the work of this fellowship and 50% with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, which is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. For those of you in this room as well as online, you can donate by giving the text to give number 73256 with keyword MUF, M-U-U-F, followed by your dollar amount, or online at muff.org/gift. Every bit makes a difference, and thank you for your generosity.
The choir will be singing something called Why We Sing. What's written in the order of service, show us how to love. We're going to sing on April 16th.
We don't know much about Jesus in a historical sense. There's stories in the Bible, there's a lot of stuff folks made up afterward. But from a strict historical perspective, there was a guy who apparently started out as a carpenter, became a rabbi. He was Jewish. He said some things that really made the Roman Empire mad, and they killed him. And there was a movement that came out of it. And as strict history goes, that's kind of it. Now, one of the striking things to say about that, he was killed by the Roman Empire. So if I had a Christian colleague here this morning, and I were to say that, and he were to hear me say, or she were to hear me say, they were to hear me say, theologians might argue the Bible says that the Jewish government in Jerusalem executed Jesus. Historical record of the time shows that was a distinctly Roman practice. It would have had to been in a very unusual situation in which the Jewish government decided on a one-time basis to execute somebody by crucifixion and then not ever do it again. Pretty improbable, especially since the Romans actually, in a kind of creepy way, enjoyed crucifying people. That was a thing the empire liked to do, to make sure that people knew how cruel it could be when you really crossed the empire. Now, I didn't know any of this until I went to theological school. So when I started reading the actual book, I was really astounded. I'm reading the Bible in my first year of theological school for ministry, and I was reading, I grew up a humanist. I was an atheist kid my entire childhood, and I'm reading the Bible, and here were lines like, think for yourself. If you don't think for yourself, someone's going to think for you, and you're not going to like what comes out of it. I thought, well, gee, I grew up thinking that, learning that at my Unitarian Universalist church. Whoa, how come I never hear anybody proof texting that in evangelical circles? And then I read the Rabbi Jesus several times in the Bible. Now, I was really shocked by that. Wait a minute, hold on. Jesus was a rabbi? He wasn't just Jewish, he's a rabbi? And then as I'm studying the rest of the year, there's more of the cruel and crazy things that the Christian church did over 2 millennia out of an anti-Semitism, the violence and the oppression. It just seemed completely bizarre. Jesus was a Jew and a rabbi, and there's all this anti-Semitic violence. How did the church not know if it was like killing somebody who was the second coming of Christ? Jesus rides a donkey into Jerusalem at the beginning of his last week, his most famous week. Palm fronds strewn at the gate of the city when he rode in. Palm fronds strewn in a way that they might also have been strewn in those days for a wedding ceremony in which the people getting married would walk across the palm fronds. It was a sign of celebration and respect to strew these fronds on the ground when a great leader would ride into the city. The thing about palm branches is there's a lot more history in that than is usually talked about. Palm trees were a significant symbol of fertility and of hospitality in the ancient Middle East, especially in a part of the world where water was scarce and the environment could be harsh. And palm trees flourish in places like this. They provide shelter, food, meaning. Palm in ancient times was an important source of nutrition as well. Dates were food for rich and for poor. You can use hearts of palm, something that comes from the center of palm trees. I've eaten those in salads. You could make wine. The seeds could be used to feed animals. The tree could provide oil from the seeds, construction material from the trunk, and the branches, the fronds themselves woven into ropes and household goods. The Canaanite ancestors of the Jews found the tree so central to their lives, they worshipped statues of a palm tree that was called Baal Tamar, which meant the goddess of the palm. Tamar was the Phoenician goddess of love and fertility, sometimes also known as Ashtoreth, who was also worshipped in the shape of a palm. And archaeologists will find images of palm trees in the ancient ruins of palaces and temples, at city gates, on the crowns of kings and queens. Now, the ancient Jews in the time of Jesus did not view palms as deities, but they were still extremely central to their lives. And later, Muslims would see palm trees also as very central to their lives. And when Jesus is born in the Quran, Mary gives birth under a palm tree. It's interesting, though, that when a lot of Christian folks began celebrating this Sunday before Easter, they had never heard of a palm tree. And many of the stories about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem don't specifically mention the branches of palms. They just say branches. And so there were all kinds of words for this beginning of that last week. There was Olive Sunday for olive branches, Willow Sunday for willow branches. Sometimes it was just called Branch Sunday. So Jesus rides in on a donkey, though, on an ass specifically. And his followers proclaim the king is arriving. Now, that was a very dangerous thing to do. Generally, when the Roman governor, for example, Pilate would arrive and there would be, we're still working on that signal, aren't we? See, the Roman governor or there's no record of a Caesar ever arriving, but the governor would arrive and there would be palm branches strewn about, but the governor would arrive on a great stallion through the big gate of the city of Jerusalem, or any city that a Roman luminary was coming to visit or coming in as the new governor or ruler. Jesus, interestingly enough, did not go through the big gate of the city. He went through the back gate. The back gate usually you use to carry out your trash to the trash heap outside of the city. He was using the workers' entrance, not the Caesar's entrance. And he's not riding a stallion, he's riding an ass, a working animal. And then his followers proclaim that a king is arriving. A king who talks about the least of us should be the people we're caring for. That same teacher who's talking about who is our neighbor, probably the neighbor who's most difficult to live with. And when he's asked, so what should we do about paying taxes? Caesar wants us to pay in Roman coins. And Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to the holy what is holy. such subversive things angered the empire. His entry that Passover, that day that we now call Passover, was a direct challenge to the rule of the Roman Empire. So this is the thing about, I tell you all of that story because I'm reading this, I remember for the first time understanding Jesus in a very different light as this revolutionary fellow who's looking out for anybody and everybody rather than the needs of the high and mighty, the powerful, the cruel. He had to know that if he's going to go into Jerusalem, the capital of the empire in which he of the kingdom in which he was in, and the regional capital of the great Roman Empire of the time, something bad was going to happen. And the story is told it's only a matter of days before they arrest him and then execute him by crucifixion. And still he goes into the city. What would compel a rabbi to risk his life this way? I didn't really have a good answer for that for a long time. And it was actually when I was reading Rachel Naomi Raymond's dream of the daffodil on the rock that I thought, maybe I have some hint as to why he would choose to live that way. Raymond writes that the dream of the daffodil on the rock lurked in her mind for some years. Its meaning took time to grow within her. And it was only after she came to a crisis in her life she understood what the dream was saying to her. It came in a flash, she said, just like the dream first came. The rock was afraid to let the daffodil bloom because the daffodil could come to harm if it were exposed. But at the same time, if the daffodil did not bloom, it would die. Now, the thing I learned about dreams also actually in theological school was one of the instructors I took classes from was somebody who taught a lot about dreams and dreaming. He was a Unitarian Universalist minister who wrote a great deal about dreaming. And he once told me, all dreams come in the service of health and wholeness. Each of us has dreams calling us to blossom in some way, to live our lives more fully. But then some years later, I also learned that there are those sometimes rare dreams that are calling us to a health and wholeness, but it might be a health and wholeness that's beyond just our own and sometimes asks some sacrifice of us. So I'm thinking a lot about that dream, thinking a lot about a Jewish rabbi riding into Jerusalem, probably knowing that what he was doing was going to mean his death, but choosing to live for what blossoms, for the beauty of life, for what is good. He had to be feeling fear, but he didn't live by his fear. Rachel Naomi Raymond talks about this daffodil bulb blossoming. And the daffodil must blossom if it's going to live, even though there are real things for a daffodil blossom to be afraid of. We hope that our children will go out and take risks in life, but there are risks. Nothing is risk-free. Dangers are real. And finally, I learned and understood from Rachel Naomi Raymond's story that we have fear, but we cannot live by our fears. It must be frightening to walk through the doors of a congregation for the first time, especially if you've never been in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. But something calls to us that's greater than the fears we might have. The fear is reasonable. There's good reasons to feel afraid. I wanted my children when they were young to be afraid of a hot stove burner. My son once he's in a backpack, and I turned around to pick up a pot, and he reached out to look at the stove, the hot electric coil on the stove, and just touched it. He may not even have touched it, but boy, he never touched a hot stove again after that. He had a healthy fear of a hot stove. But I think what I fear most as an interim minister who comes in, and as Marjorie said, I will be leaving. We already know I'm leaving in about 18 months. I'm pre-fired, as I like to say. And what I fear most in interim ministry is that a congregation will relent to its greatest fears rather than acknowledge them, but live by its greatest joys, its aspirations and its hopes. Fear is useful for survival, but to live by it is such a drab and impoverished existence. No one joins and stays in a religious community to be more afraid. They join to be liberated in some way, to become freer. The point of religion is for us to find hope, even when the world seems hopeless. If my neighbors so when I think about standing up here this morning and talking yet again about a school shooting, which is something that's so terribly hard for me, I could live by fear. I could go out and buy I forget the name of these automatic weapons, an AR-15, AR-14, it has a stupid name. Here's this sort of way of empire, like the Roman Empire. Go out and buy a gun. You can defend your home. You can defend yourself on the street by whipping out that pistol. I don't want to live that way. I don't want to live that way with you. I hope you don't choose to live that way. To live by fear constantly. I want to spend my time getting to know neighbors, especially the ones that are hard to understand. I don't want to live in a hopeless world where I'm busy arming myself. Because the reality is we can arm ourselves over and over and over again until we're all walking around with some nuclear weapon on our back, and life will still be filled with fear, and we'll be disconnected and lonely as ever. That's why I think the world needs this fellowship. You cherish diversity. You cherish hope. You cherish going out and caring for neighbors who are very unlike you. This is what the world needs. Not to be living by big walls, living in armored cars, or people carrying around automatic guns. The web of life we celebrate is not just a nice idea. It's the foundation of our existence. That blossoming of that daffodil, the smiles and the anticipation on our children's faces yesterday as they began the talent show, and the utter terror in their eyes as they stood there and realized they were going to be singing in front of everybody. What a gift to give them. Yes, they were afraid at times, but they also knew they were loved. They also knew we wanted them to blossom in the moment. And every one of them didn't let their fear hold them back from what they were doing. They sang. They read poetry. They did magic tricks. It was a beautiful, beautiful afternoon. There are no walls thick enough and strong enough to prevent death itself. There aren't enough assault rifles. Let's not listen to the greedheads who somehow think a culture of guns and gun violence will save us from anything. The world needs what we have here. The guns will always be there. But let's not live by the fear of those guns or of that fear that imagines that they're somehow useful for us. Rachel Naomi Raymond writes, finding the right protection is the first responsibility for us in this world because we are vulnerable. But we cannot make anything change without exposure and involvement, without process and criticism. Let us flower. Let us find a way for each of us to flower, encouraging each of us to flower, and for this fellowship to continue to flower as it has for several generations now. And if we find ourselves fearful or angry, let's use that fear, let's use the anger as fertilizer. Let's feed the roots of our lives as they blossom. Because the reason that Rachel Naomi Raymond's rock said you mustn't bloom is the same reason the daffodil must bloom. The reason that a rabbi 2,000 years ago would ride into Jerusalem knowing he would give his life for it is because he cherished the very thing he was talking about with his people day by day. Sure, it's a dangerous world, but if we're going to make heaven here and now, it will be by blossoming, each and every one of us, and by the blossoming of love and mercy in the world as a whole. I plan to walk on palm fronds when I go into whatever Jerusalem lies ahead. I don't want to bury my soul under stones. I'd rather risk everything here with you, and hopefully, as I risk everything, it will mean a nice long life. But should it be short, I would rather have this joyful living with you in moments than a drab life under rocks, buried by fear. I invite you to sing with me. Blessed Spirit of my life, number 86, if you would like to use the books. That words should be on your screens in the library at home or here in front of us. I invite you to stand in spirit or in body. Go now as you go out into the world, go with hope, acknowledge your fears, but live by your loves, blossom. May your lives blossom beautifully this week, in the weeks and years to come. And when the stones seem too heavy to pull off, you have some friends here that can help you lift them back. Go in peace, be in peace.